All right, closing out the phone here. This is a meeting of the EDIC Board, Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. We are meeting in the Harbor Masters Conference Room, but this is a hybrid meeting, and folks can join from afar. It's a call to the order of the board. Per the revised open meeting laws, as the recent amendments to the open meeting law allows, the EDIC will continue to hold meetings remotely. Adequate alternative access to the meeting is provided through that Zoom link. So going to take attendance. Gretel Seeley, present. Taylor Hedges. Here. And we've got Patty Nags.
Here.
Mike Delasio.
Aye.
Okay, and so I know that Jerry is at a conference in California. Rob is flying somewhere or other for business. So it looks like we have the five of us, Tom Belf as well. Take a look at the meeting minutes from May 13th. I hope you all had a chance to take a look at those. Any suggested edits, comments, omissions?
Nope.
Good. All right. Can I have a motion to approve? And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hey.
Excellent. All right, we're going to jump right into the status report of the current initiatives with a focus on the team from Weston and Sampson. And so they are going to give us an update on the feasibility assessment work that they've been doing for the expansion of Condelin Road. Taylor and I just met and took a look at the original proposal and, peppered ourselves with questions. So you've got a ready audience here that's looking forward to hearing how it all is going and sort of the progress that you guys are making. So Susan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Could Lee enable me to share my screen? Or if it's not Lee, if it's someone else.
Yeah, it is Lee.
You should
right.
be able to.
Okay. All right. As host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on.
Looks like it works now, right?
Let's see.
Button just popped up on my screen. No?
So she is identified as a panelist, right?
Yep. Are you, it's multiple participants can share simultaneously is what I
Oh,
did.
I think I've got it now. I think it's working now.
There you
Yep.
Okay. What's everyone seeing right now? Because it's
We see the cover page.
you see the cover page. Okay, great. Good, good. All right, so thank you. Yep, so this is
Land is cleared. It's pretty much sand and clay. Perfect.
yeah, you see the fun topography out there. So yeah, this is us sort of doing like a final check-in before we do some of our final feasibility analysis and recommendations. So Jeff is going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure, and I did notice on the agenda that the team that was doing the power study is after us. I might stay on and listen because I think that study, I read through it. It's kind of like macro, and maybe we can work with them to get a little more specific information that'll be helpful for us. We will talk about our interviews that we've had so far and a couple that we're still trying to get. And, Jean can kind of, she's had a lot of them with a lot of the folks talking about the market feasibility and funding sources, so she can summarize that. And then we'll talk about some of the feasibility analysis that we've been working on and some other opportunities. And I don't know, we can talk about a decision matrix that we kind of have thought about putting together for the EDIC to sort of, compare different alternatives and phasing opportunities. If it's not a way you guys want to go, that's fine. But we thought it might be a good way to sort of, summarize and compare some of the data.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Jeff, will you start us off?
Of course. Good afternoon, evening, everyone.
Hi, Jeff.
So I just want to go over some of the updates that we've had since the last meeting. We've spent a lot of time talking about ledge removal, which is always exciting. As I'm sure everyone up there knows, there's quite a bit of ledge, and that's going to greatly impact the costs to develop this land. But we have pushed forward on some preliminary layouts for the water and sewer system, which is really our focus on the infrastructure side. At last meeting, we provided an update that we did speak with a few folks from the city, and in theory, no one was going to go on the record as saying absolutely, we'll take all the flow that you can give us, but in theory, this development will be able to apply for a sewer connection permit and start providing flow to the existing system once the wastewater treatment plant is upgraded, which may be a few years off, but in theory, that's a possibility. I'll also go through some of the proposed water layouts, which is a little more straightforward. We spent some time talking about other utilities that would be required. Of course, it's power, which is kind of a the evaluation is performed by others, but we spent some time talking about gas main, talking about depth of roadway with a few of our folks in the office, and once we're in there blasting a trench for the water and sewer, I don't think that getting buried electrical or a gas main in there is going to be that big of a deal. That those will be further up in the road, so I don't think that will make a big impact on gas, but that is something obviously that needs to be considered. And then we spent some more time when we were looking at the roadway, and this is something that we introduced last month. Well, this is something we've been talking about for a few months now, is how does this proposed roadway work with the development? Does it need to go all the way to a cul-de-sac that, for everyone who's not familiar with the plan, I'll show it on the next slide, but are there opportunities to shorten this road, at least in the first phase, provide some buildable lots and then expand as these lots get built out? That's a consideration, just to reduce some of the costs up front. And then obviously trucking considerations, because of the slope of this land. If if these businesses that we want to bring in are going to be trucking heavy, we really need to consider how much land that we provide to each buildable lot, because a lot of that will be used for creating ramps and driveways that have a sufficient slope to allow trucks to get in and out. So some those are some of the things that we have further advanced on. And then as Suzanne mentioned, and we talk a little bit more about it in the slides later on, we started talking electrical, and we reviewed the report. It's evident that there are potential issues with the grid, which I don't think comes as a surprise to anyone up there. We started looking into to alternatives. Can things like solar or other green electric sources be integrated into this plan? So those are certainly exciting opportunities that are, I think, a little more feasible now than they were a few years ago, and certainly 13 years ago, the last time that this was really looked at. So Sue, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. I hope that this is visible. I understand that it depending on your screen size, it may be hard to see. There's a few things layered on here. So hopefully everybody can see it on their screen. What this shows is a proposed water and sewer layout for the area. There are a couple things going on here that I'll just try to explain. The black line and the red line shown, they are both gravity sewer, proposed gravity sewer. And there's two different ways to do this. We can either collect the flow and just follow the main roadway down and around through the curve and out into the proposed pumping station down at the bottom, right where the Condolan Road tag is down there. Or the alternative is to bring it down what we're referring to as the emergency egress road, which is only emergency egress because of the steepness. We could bring it past several of the existing businesses on Condolan Road and potentially pick up that flow in the sewer system, which, you know, it really could be performed either way, but, you know, this would save a little bit of digging and installation of gravity sewer to pick up some of those, you know, existing businesses and get them off septic, which, you know, I think everyone would probably appreciate. So so those are just two options on the sewer side. They would both.
Can you use the highlighter? I'm pretty sure I know, but would just show me where the emergency road is. That right there. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And it's only emergency egress just because it is so steep through there that to get the maximum 2% grade really that you would want for trucking, they needed to follow the existing grade on, you know, coming around the slope. And that road is probably going to be required by the city just because, you know, for things like fires, if there was a fire up there, you'd want to have an additional place to get out in case, you know, one exit was blocked. So that's probably going to be required by the city. And then also shown on here is in blue is the proposed water system. And again, this is a lot more straightforward. We would propose to connect to the existing system. The problem being is that based on some summaries from the 2010 report, it was deemed that the water pressure for emergency fire flows was too low already. And obviously adding additional businesses to this area and having those businesses be significantly higher than Condolan Road, we likely wouldn't have any water pressure up there. So so we would propose to have a booster pump and a water tower installed, and you can see the water tower there in that blue circle. It would be installed at the relative highest part of this development area, and that would, you know, it would store water for emergency purposes and to, you know, to reduce that surge up and down. And again, you know, a water booster pump would be required to bring it in from the existing system and pump it up to the proper elevation. And then that would feed all of the businesses up there. You know, just, you know, as simple as that. So so that's really everything overlaid. You know, obviously we don't need to put sewer on both routes. I don't know, you know, we haven't maybe touched on it once or twice before, but I don't know if we've really made any decisions on whether we wanted to connect the existing businesses for sure. You know, we could also propose a connection that's further up to the northeast part of the road that kind of goes off the map here to connect in those businesses as well. If, you know, if the board thinks that that's warranted. I don't know if anyone has a comment on that, but.
Taylor,
I think it would just be asking those businesses, some of them are newer, so they have new and sufficient septics, so maybe they wouldn't want to, pay to tie in now.
Mhm.
Might like the option. I think it would really be, so you're saying as you come down the emergency road going left down Connell, it's not as easy to tie those in. Correct? But everything to,
Yeah, if we wanted to tie those in, we would probably propose to go down that emergency road, only so that, you would save a little bit of pipe. But, either way, the pumping station was located at the relative low spot of this whole development, this whole area, really. So, if we did only the new development and brought the sewer down the southwestern route and around the corner there, then we could just, install a regular gravity sewer in Condon Road in the future. If
Jeff, where is the lowest point as you're describing it?
Yeah, the pumping station is at the relative low point right there.
Okay, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and typically those will be, you size them, both the diameter of the manhole and the depth. Typically, most common nowadays is to do an 8-foot diameter precast manhole and roughly 15 feet deep. So they're not shallow, they're quite deep, and obviously we'll be digging through, quite a bit of ledge down there, but that's, typical of what these pumping stations would consist of. I'm not imagining a grand building with, large pumps or anything like that. It would be a precast manhole, pretty easy to come by, and some submersible pumps that would pump it out the force main. So I think that's it. I mean, if we don't need to make a decision on which route is preferable. These are just kind of two options that we were considering. Cost wise, to go direct down the hill saves us about 1,000 linear feet of pipe and also ledge blasting. But they're both probably going to be relatively similar costs. The big cost will be the ledge removal. So
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
someone has their hand up.
Yeah, Patty Nags, I have a question. What sewer treatment plant are you pumping to this proposed sewer line?
yeah, so the only one that I know of for the city on Essex Street, Essex Ave, it's the larger wastewater treatment facility down by the harbor. And so we would collect all of the flow by gravity in this area, and then it would go to the pumping station, and that pumping station would convey the flow through what's called a force main. It's a smaller diameter pipe, and it's essentially like a hose. And the nearest connection to the existing system is Magnolia at Essex. And there is right near where the one of the water treatment plants is. There's also a sewer pumping station in that lot, and that's essentially where the closest place that we could pump flow to.
And how many linear feet is that away from the site, do you think, rough and tough?
Yep, it's
Couple miles.
about 8,800 feet, I believe.
Mile and a half, a little more than a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot of digging. A force main, it unlike a gravity main that we would be installing here, you don't have to worry about grade as much. It doesn't have to be as deep, probably as shallow as 3.5 feet, and it can go up and down hills, no problem. You just have to design the pumping station to handle whatever the biggest delta is on the head.
And that route, Jeff, that you just described there, the 8,800 feet, like where, is that going along a road, a public way, or is there a right of way through people's backyards? Like what does that mean?
No, I mean, the proposed route, and I don't have the graphic here. I did display it last month. I don't know if
That's okay.
bring that up, but it's essentially down Magnolia all the way to Essex. So it's Condolin to Magnolia. The trickiest part, which I did notice there was some previous discussions on, is getting it onto the MBTA rail, which actually we can see in this graphic here, just to the northwest. Permitting to get under there can be a bear, but it's certainly possible. There are methods like directional drilling that you could stand. You could have a construction crew far away from the train tracks, and then they actually drill under the ground and can get under there without impacting these certain crossings. And this would be certainly a location that we would consider something like that. But yeah, it would go underneath the railway, and then you discharge to an existing sewer manhole down at Essex.
Thank you.
So in the final report, there will be an estimate of what that cost would be. I assume this is standard civil engineering stuff where you could sort of estimate on a per foot basis what it would be to dig up roads and put in sewer.
Absolutely. Yep. So that will be in there, that cost estimate. I'm not anticipating getting into these specialized construction techniques like the directional drilling, only because we don't know that that's necessary at this point, and those costs can vary wildly once you really start digging into it and you do borings and survey and talk to the regulators and the folks that are in charge of that train easement. So but yes, there'll be a basic construction cost for installing of the water main, the sewer main, and the pumping station and force main, kind of on a per linear foot cost basis.
And can I ask a stupid, probably a stupid question, but when you go down Magnolia Ave and there are houses there, but they are not connected, they have, septic systems, right? You put in connectors in the event that somebody wants to connect later, but there would be no assessments or anything else for those people. Is that correct? Or that's
No, unfortunately,
decision.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. So there are systems that are called low pressure sewers. For some reason, they use them on the Cape a lot. We do a lot of designs for systems on the Cape. You could connect into to a low pressure system, but the pumping station that we believe is going to be required here on Condolin Road is going to be a high pressure system, and it's not common to have connections into those. It's possible, but not on a per house basis. You would only connect in with another pumping station that you could match the pressure conditions of that utility.
All right, it sounds like it wasn't a dumb question then.
No, it certainly wasn't. It's possible, but to set up a low pressure system here in Condolin, yeah, I just don't see it being cost effective for this development. That would, potentially, if the city thought that would be beneficial to the residents on Magnolia, for example, then it could be considered, but that wasn't considered here.
Question, so you're considering building this sewer carry line strictly for Condolin Park down to the pumping station?
Correct.
Thoughts, Patty?
Hello, yeah,
Yeah, no, just your thoughts on that.
I think it's crazy.
Is that a technical term, or is that more just a
That's a real estate term, isn't it?
real estate?
That's a technical term.
Patty, because of the length or the route?
A couple of reasons. One, because of the value of it to homeowners, if it was to become available. And for instance, when they extended the sewer in 2005 on Essex Ave and they went to Essex with it, every house they passed by did have a connection. It had a location for a connection, it had a fitting, did not have a pipe to the house. However, each and every house was assessed a fee at that point in time, 2005, 2006, and
Even if
residents.
they didn't take the option then,
Correct. I believe it was a $20,000 fee or $10,000 fee. You could do it with the no interest loan. But that was an important part of it. And then the way that it is, I don't know if they allow people to rebuild new septic systems if sewer is available in the street. There is a lot of value to having a sewer versus a septic because it doesn't limit the size of your house. And they calculate size of house by number of bedrooms. And right now, I know Magnolia Ave is a septic system street, and as is all of Magnolia. I just think that's a significant project not to include other people who would be interested in it.
oh, so it's not the technical issue of building, it's more around accessibility to this new service then you're saying is.
Right, the crazy assessment has to do with excluding people from using it.
Okay, thank you.
It's not the engineering whatsoever. We know how to build, we blast, we use pumps, like every house in North Gloucester has a pump to the system because it was impossible to get it to, I'm guessing, I don't know the technical term. It was impossible to build a low flow system there, I believe, because they didn't have depth.
Well, so I think that what Jeff is saying, like this is, he's proposing something that will work for Condolin Road for this economic development project. And so I think the EDIC understanding what that looks like and what that costs is good information. And, there's nothing to say that, you can't have that conversation with the town and say like, okay, this is something that would work for this. If you wanted to partner with us, like, this is what we would spend, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just maybe gives you some information to have that conversation.
Yeah, well,
Well,
the EDIC is the town in reality. I mean,
I think what we'd have to look at, Patty, would be, obviously the existing homes are, I think you'd have to look at what the financial draw would be versus the expense.
Right.
To completely change the system. So I know that's, it's a long road. But we'd have to really, it's probably pretty easy to drive down the road and count houses and multiply by 20,000 and see what that's going to bring to the table.
But also, wouldn't we also look for developable lots maybe that are not developable now because of the septic issues, right? And
we can do that too, without a doubt. It's something going to increase that. So that could be good or bad, as Patty knows. It's either people will be happy that there's septic coming because then they can develop, or people are going to be really ticked off that there's septic coming and that now there's all these opportunities for developers to come in. So, we certainly need to look at it as part of the project. And I know I think there's 10 duplexes going in across the street from me on Magnolia Ave that are probably all going to be putting septics in because that project's further ahead than us.
yeah.
I guess we just need to know, we do need to look at it. They're not going to stop building because they're going to wait for septic to come or sewer to come in 5 years, but
Yeah, and Patty, it's not a crazy question. You know, it's not an exclusion situation. It comes down to engineering, really. The force main allows you to easily connect a certain area that you've collected the flow, and then you use pumps to pump it into this force main. It allows you to bring it to areas that might have a higher elevation, or at least go, you know, through a steep part of a hill, which is the situation we have here. So the elevation between here on Condolin Road and the discharge location on Essex is such that it goes, you know, downhill and then uphill and then downhill. So the situation that you're talking about, where they came through a certain street or neighborhood, and they allowed connections, that was a gravity sewer main. So they left a Y in front of a, you know, either a buildable lot or a home that was already there that just happened to be on septic, and they capped it. And they said, if you ever want to come back and connect into the sewer, you know, pay your fee, and then you tie right on. You don't have to dig up the road to make the connection. It's already there. That's done a lot, and that's actually what we would propose to do here in this new development. And certainly on Condolin Road, if we take that route that goes down the emergency road and out, we would leave Ys out there, service connections, so that if someone didn't want to connect in as we're, you know, digging down through the road, they can do it at a later date. That's just not possible with a force main. And so it's that, you know, it's the cost benefit analysis. You know, if we wanted to install a gravity main between Condolin Road and Essex, there are some areas that may be 60, 70 feet deep. So that's not feasible. You know, the deepest sewer I've ever dealt with is probably 30 feet. And you're already at least 5 feet deep in the ground. So as the elevation changes, it can get very deep, because you need to keep a constant slope on a gravity main, versus a force main can go up and down. So that's kind of, you know, why we're going down that path. Now, you know, there's certainly additional engineering that can be performed. You can pump halfway, for example. You can pump to the high point of a certain area, and then install a gravity main from there down to Essex Ave, for example, and then you could connect in homes if the elevations allow it. But yeah, that was the decision process, is that to get it from here to the existing collection system in Gloucester, you know, we went with the force main, just because of cost.
Jeff, I guess two things. So one is, and Susan, is it, so I understand why you did it, certainly. Is it a value for either you or us to reach out to Mike Hale or to David Fields to sort of get their reaction / preference? Certainly Mike will understand why you would engineer it this way. But is that a value, or not really now or at this scope? And then the second, which isn't really as a question, but maybe as a comment, is if this is going to be the recommendation, and I understand why, I do think you should dedicate, you know, a little bit of the report to what we've just talked about, and that there is, you know, an alternative. The alternative, you know, looks like this and costs a lot more, blah, blah, blah. But I think that you should put something in the report about why you designed it this way, and that if the city wanted to make it available to residents and current lots, that would require more engineering and significant increase in cost.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like that's how you handle it. Because like the report will include some recommendations, and that's going to be like a recommendation is that, you know, we designed how you could do it. There are other options that aren't like focused on the economic development of Condolin Road, right? Like there are other opportunities. We didn't explore them because we were focused on this, but you know, Jeff mentioned, you know, you do the, you know, the force main to a certain point, and then, you know, gravity from there. But you know, you'll know what, you know, and you're right, like this should be explained pretty clearly, you know, these additional opportunities in the report, but you'll know what your, you know, general conceptual costs are for this, and then at least you have like a point of starting point for, you know, negotiation and talking.
Okay. Yep. This is
Keep
good.
going.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want us to keep going?
Yep.
Okay. So these are, we just listed all the stakeholders that we've been able to speak with so far, and a couple more that are, they're sort of like, you know, we're almost there with them. I know Applied Materials, I think, is going to be still important, and we are reviewing their NDAs. Like that's has been kind of the sticking point. So I think that though will happen in like the next week or so. And then also Jean, I think, has talked to her the contact at EDA, who is, you know, in charge of this region, and so that's going to get scheduled pretty soon as well. But you know, we did talk to a number of people in the town. We did talk to a number of people who support businesses and who have businesses in the area. So Jean, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the results of these you know, conversations? Because I think this gets to, Tom, what you're talking about with like the market conditions. Like, I think this is, you know, some of the things that we kind of learned are pretty important about, you know, here.
Sure. I'll start with talking about my conversation. Well, so let me start with talking about my conversation with Geetha Ramani from Mass Development. Her initial reaction was that she was very excited about the project. She was very pleased to hear that this project was under consideration. Mass Development is very supportive of any initiative that increases the supply of manufacturing space. Her particular charge, though, is to really look at programs that assist the businesses that might actually be expanding in the area. She's not in the infrastructure space. So we talked about the product that they have available through Mass Development. They've got a whole host of financing products for new industrial construction. They've got loans, loan guarantees. There's a number of banks that they partner with for financing. She also said that there's some brownfields products. I don't think there's a whole lot of brownfields, maybe a small number of space in this particular development, but they've got that available. She also talked about the possibility of tax exempt bonds that could be used for construction of any of the industrial space as well. And PACE financing is, I don't know if the members of the board are familiar with PACE financing, but it's basically using a property tax assessment to pay for a lot of the energy improvements that could be associated with the development. And it doesn't really count as debt towards your development. And it can actually be a very, very attractive interest rate, and it can be conveyed with the property. So this is something that they're really pushing for, is the use of the commercial PACE program. They also, if this project reaches the next phase of, I guess, consideration, they also will provide some real estate advisory services. So I think if we're able to come up with a kind of conceptual plan and a strategy, they would also be able to work with you and actually bring in some real estate advisors to sort of, I guess, test and assist the EDIC with some of the ideas as far as bringing in different businesses. She was particularly intrigued, I think, with the idea of looking at blue economy and green economy businesses. That is one of the priorities at Mass Development, and she was very interested in that aspect of the project. We were even brainstorming a little bit on the call, and she talked about initiatives with Essex Technical School and ways to try to train the workforce, particularly focusing on the blue economy, and was actually talking about making a visit to Gloucester in the next few days. She may have already been there since our call and wants to take a look at the site and get a better understanding of the opportunities there. As far as the Mass Works and where we might be able to get some assistance with some of the infrastructure costs, we need more information in order for her to really talk to her colleagues at Mass Works I explained to her that we're working with you and that we still need to really get some feedback from our clients as far as what the direction is on the layout of this potential subdivision, so that we'd have a better idea of what could be the potential costs associated with the infrastructure, what's the yield going to be as far as developable lots. And the way I left it with her is that after we had gotten a sense of that direction and from the EDIC, that we schedule a follow-up call with her and with her colleagues at MassWorks to really talk a little bit more about what are the potential financing tools for the infrastructure itself. Because I mean, you're probably familiar that every year there is funding available through the One Stop program, but I think that's it's something that we need to get a little bit more information about the parameters of the infrastructure needs before we can really explore that in greater depth. So that was really the gist of my call with Geetha, but she was very interested, and for all I know, she might have already made her visit to Gloucester since our call. One of the other calls that I had was with a commercial realtor, Tom Barry from CBRE, who specializes in industrial properties and the leasing and sale of industrial properties. He did have some concerns about the site and the location. One of the things that he cautioned me is that new construction is fairly costly, and at times it's difficult to lease out space that's associated with new construction. That it's running about $180 a square foot on sites that don't have particularly high construction or site development costs. And that usually translates to rents that are in the $12 to $15 a square foot. He also mentioned that the market has softened a bit recently, and that's due to the fact that there's a large amount of product that's come on the market. There's some very significant developments that have actually been constructed in the greater Boston area, as large as 500,000 square feet, and that this has resulted in an increase in the vacancy rate and a softening in the rentals. He mentioned that the exponential growth that we saw in industrial rents over the last few years is really kind of a thing of the past. That was an anomaly that was associated with the Amazon effect, because there was such a strong demand for Amazon type warehouse space. It was driving out a lot of the industrial users and inflating the cost of industrial space to levels that were just unprecedented. And that typically you see a fairly stable lease increase in the industrial market. So he thinks that we're going to see a stabilization in the rental levels in the industrial market. So that I don't think I don't think there'll be a decrease from what I heard from Tom, but I don't think you're going to see any significant increase in the average rental levels. What that means, I think, for this particular development is that if we are to have new construction, it's coming in at that $12 to $15 a square foot, it does limit the target tenants. Because of the location in Gloucester, he felt that the tenant catchment area is more limited than some of the other markets that he works within. And that if there was a premium associated with site development, such as working with ledge and whatever the cost winds up being for the extension of the sewer system, that could be a concern in terms of marketing for any sort of spec space. His advice was that really going after some of the existing businesses in the area, and this is something that we also heard from Jay McNiff as well, is probably going to be one of the best strategies, is to look at businesses such as Applied Materials who have a demand for existing space. They're probably going to be the best target market for any additional space that's created here. So that was pretty much the outcome of my discussion regarding the market with Mr. Barry.
That sounds great, Jeannie. And that's generally consistent with, we had reached out to Mass Econ. I know we've mentioned them before, and you guys might have even been on the phone
Yeah.
when Peter there was talking last week. And he sent Gretel and I a CBRE report for Q1 2023 from the Boston metro area. I'll forward that to you guys. And at least Peter's comment was, even with a sort of some pullback in the commercial marketplace, that flex industrial space is still performing very well, that new adaptable space is at a premium. I mean, and the numbers that you gave are, again, the average per square footage was $15 to CBRE. So it sounds like you're getting some good information, and I'll forward this report along to you. He had mentioned a Suzanne Duca, who's the director of research at CBRE in New England. And I'm sure that obviously what Tom Barry was saying sounds very consistent with this report.
Yeah, and I've read some of the other reports, and there's, like I said, there's the vacancy rates have been declining, and the lease numbers are basically are stabilizing. And in terms of the long-term prospects, I mean, what Tom was saying is that they hate to make predictions in terms of long-term prospects. Nobody really foresaw the Amazon impact. And he's a little concerned about what the impact of AI may be on the industrial market, but it's not something that they really have the ability to predict at this point.
No.
But he did say that the other recommendation that he had was to really target flexibility in the space that's being created, not to go so much for the kind of large scale space, but to really look at the kind of flex space that could be and kind of split up and address the needs of, in all likelihood, some of the existing businesses, but possibly also address some businesses that might be attracted to the area. And I think that if you look at some of the site constraints, I think that's probably going to make sense as well. I don't think that
Transition.
constraints are conducive to building an extremely large footprint building anyway.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Jean, because I was thinking that when you just said that, because that was a similar comment that we had to when we were kind of reviewing this with our site development team, is that those big rectangular buildings are, less efficient in a site like this because of the topography. And Jeff kind of mentioned too, like, but before we get there, I'll just explain what this map is. It's a little bit hard to read, and I think, we're going to rethink like how it's going to appear maybe in the final report, but it's not really, so much a product as like the tool that we were using to see, in addition to the information that we had from before, like what else do we need to know and to look at like what the actual site yield and development feasibility is out there. So we had our GIS people overlay a couple of things onto sort of this old layout, or this layout from 2010 of the roadway and the lots out there. And so we laid out soils and like depth to bedrock, and no surprise to anybody here, right? Like it's all shallow depth to bedrock. So that is a premium, right? Like anything you do is going to require blasting. So that's fine. We know that now. We had the wetlands mapped and those are those sort of like yellowy areas surrounded by orangey areas. The orange areas are sort of those set-offs that you're required to have off of these water resources. This is an undocumented, this came from also, this was sort of identified, I think, in 2010 also, but there's a identified but not confirmed vernal pool out there. We can talk more about that, we put about 100-foot buffer around it, like recognizing that, like, you know, if it does get confirmed, there will be some sort of regulatory requirements about like what you can build and where around it. You know, we can think a little bit more about that and talk a little bit more about like, you know, how that's factored into this analysis. But we thought it was important to at least show you, you know, it's there, it's on the city's GIS. It's not, you know, something that no one knows about. Like, it's there. It's just not been formally documented or confirmed by the Mass DEP. So the other thing that we did is and this is the part that's hard to see, but it's, you know, this area that's like kind of grabbed here in the middle. You know, we separated the site into like two main categories. One is a less than 15% grade change, and one is a greater than 15% grade change. And the reason we did that is because, you know, talking to the site development folks, you know, 15% is really the, you know, up to 15 can be challenging and does have a cost premium. Beyond 15%, like, it goes up exponentially. So, you know, we thought it might be interesting to look at, you know, which areas are less than 15%, because, you know, part of our thinking with this analysis is also to identify, like, you know, we talked about phasing. Are there areas of, you know, along this new Condolin Road that are easier to develop, less costly to develop than others? And that's, you know, something we can talk about in terms of, you know, our recommendations for what gets phased. You know, are there some places that, like, you know, are less, you know, are steeper and like less likely to be developed because of that additional premium that's going to be on there, you know, in terms of, you know, working with the slope and the ledge. And so I know, you know, Jeff kind of mentioned when he was talking about the roadway, like, does it make sense to build all of this, you know, in the first phase, especially? You know, maybe it makes sense eventually, maybe it doesn't, but, you know, I think the layout that he showed for his like water and sewer is maybe, you know, a layout that like is an appropriate way to, you know, phase the first phase of this, you know, roadway. So, you know, we kind of took a look at, you know, where are the areas that are, you know, this less than 15%. And
Is that what you're showing us now, Susan? There's less than-
yes, that's what I'm showing you, like these, I know, and I think I need a better way to,
No, that
it's
just
like maybe colored, but it's
cursor's
like,
fine. The cursor's fine.
Okay.
What's in the center then?
this right here is less than 15%, and you can't see it, but the hatching between these two blobs is like greater than 15%. So this is like, these are steep.
Okay,
and
then
then
that
this
area, yeah.
Area inside here is like the less than 15%.
Okay.
So these are sort of like the more developable areas. So what the folks said that we talked to for site development is that, you know, a typical industrial site, you know, is generally, you think about like 100,000 square feet building, and how big is that? That's like 2 acres ish, right? Like, and then you need like 4 acres maybe altogether, you know, to accommodate circulation and parking. However, that's like considering your site is relatively flat. A site like this, you would need, you know, for that 100,000 square foot, you would need more than 4 acres. And that's one of the things we're kind of trying to, you know, look a little more closely at, is like, what is that? Is it like 6 acres do you really need? Because you still, you know, these are industrial uses, which require like trucks, truck deliveries, and that requires internal circulation. And if your grades are complicated, then that, you know, requires even more room to, you know, keep the trucks on a level that we're, you know, where it's safe. And then Jean had kind of mentioned, you know, the type of development that the CBRE gentleman had recommended was like more, you know, smaller flex space. And that's exactly the same thing that the site development folks kind of said, is that, you know, you will lose a lot more efficiency if you just do a giant 100,000 square foot rectangle versus, you know, if you maybe, you know, had a use where like smaller multiple buildings could be worked into the grade, and that's less site work. So, you know, those are some of the things we're kind of thinking about, you know, for you know, how to recommend for you guys to move forward. But so we wanted to show you this because like we thought like those are sort of the main constraints, and they kind of give you a pretty good idea of like, you know, where you might want to focus at first. And underlying here, right, is I guess the analysis that was done back in 2010. And, because it's residential zoning, these lots are laid out at like, give or take an acre, with like the small frontage, and they're really long, and that's not probably something that's appropriate for like an industrial lot. So
It's helpful. Oh, let's see what there you go.
all right.
You could possibly do a combination of maybe laying it out with one property that's large enough to accommodate a large building, and it could either be one large user, or you could have a subdivision within that large building. And as Sue mentioned, if we look at some of these lots that are extremely constrained with either wetlands or slope, maybe that's a lot that accommodates a smaller building, really working around the site constraints. Another thing that we were talking about is that it might be possible to look at it in such a way that stormwater is managed on a kind of a subdivision level rather than on each individual parcel. And even parking possibly too.
Right. Looking at it as like a master plan, right? Versus, just like separate lots, which you could do either. And we actually have a slide that talks about that a little bit. But I don't want to move on unless, to make sure you guys have any questions on this.
How big are those lots? How big are those lots now?
What we were showing before, they're all about an acre.
Okay.
And so actually one of the guy, team guys said, maybe even just leave them like that. And I mean, they're not existing, right? Those are just sort of proposed anyway, but like maybe leaving them kind of in that layout gives you some flexibility. So you let like the developer decide, like you don't set the lot for them. So I don't know, we're thinking about a couple of different ways to, kind of propose this, but I mean, I think that, the land is telling us that, this kind of area here, this area here, to some extent, this area here are, your least costly, would have your least site development costs.
So I just want to say, I really appreciate, I think the creative thinking that's going into looking at these constraints and trying to figure out what could work and maximally flexible. I mean, obviously, the challenge here, is that the project, has to be large enough, right, to support these substantial infrastructure costs, including going the 1.5 miles down Magnolia Ave. What that threshold is in terms of the development of these 60 acres, I don't know, but obviously that's the challenge.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. How do you maximize it? Like at what point does it start to make sense, right?
Yeah.
So we did, we can go back to the map if we want to, but we did look at a couple of other things. Like we have some folks internally at Weston and Sampson that do solar, analysis, and they kind of looked at, we said like there's some areas that are really, really, they're above 15%. But with solar panels, they said they could go up to 20, maybe even a little bit more than that, and still, be able to do ground mounted solar. So, maybe there's some places like, maybe that's an idea for some of the areas where, it looks like they're, might be really tough to build traditional development. So if that's, we can include that in our recommendations, and we can follow up a little more on that if that's something that the EDIC is interested in. If not, that's okay. We don't have to, push it any further. And then Jean was sort of talking about like the stormwater. And so what that means is that like maybe there's a site, you're going to have to look at how you're going to treat stormwater for the roadway, right? And every developer that comes in is going to have to figure out stormwater, and that's tough to do again with the ledge. But if you built it out as part of the public infrastructure, that's a cost that you're taking away from the site development costs. However, it does mean that now and into the future, like someone has to maintain it annually. So like if it's taking you a while to like get tenanted up, like that would be, I don't know, if it's the EDIC that does it and owns it, like you're gonna have to pay for maintenance. And then, you know, how do you figure out, like, you would need almost like a condo association, you know, to be able to maintain the stormwater infrastructure into the future. But it's just, again, like we were trying to think, you know, we were talking about the high cost for development and the high rents that you need to do it. And what are the things that like the city or the EDIC could do to, you know, address that?
I think, is it easy enough for you to include that in a plan? Because I think that would be important.
You're talking about the stormwater?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. You know, we can certainly propose a location for it. You know, we can't design it, but we could show it as a, you know, option, like a concept, I think.
yeah. And does that, I mean, do you see that as then limiting or dictating how lots get used after the fact, or would it be out of the way enough that people can still come in and do what they want to do? Because I just know that from building in Gloucester, it was the previous engineer, but I know a lot of people had to deal with a lot of nitpicky stormwater issues, and it does get tricky on a small lot to accommodate. So if it was something that we dealt with on a master plan, it might help all those small lots, because it ends up taking all your parking, or it takes the best space to put a building or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like there are benefits to it, but there's, you know, what we were thinking about it and talking through, there's also cost to it, you know, like you said, like someone has to maintain it every year. And you know, you could, you know, we thought about maybe you phase it, and so it all gets kind of permitted, and you know, as the new guy comes in, like he has space down, you know, I don't know, like here where like it's already permitted and he just has to pay, you know what I mean? Like there's, you know, we were trying to think of a couple of different ways to, you know, propose it.
Yeah,
do like a mini.
just maybe a concept, you know, maybe, we don't need necessarily hard numbers on that, but some type of concept on that would be helpful.
Let me talk to Jim. He's the stormwater guy and like the site development guys, and we'll you know, think about what we can propose and show. And I don't want to like necessarily, like, you know, I don't know that we're going to go far enough, or that we're going to find like the ideal place to put it, like in terms of our site feasibility analysis. But you know, we could show it. You know, we could show it somewhere.
Well, it might be, you know, it's just something to consider maybe in phase 2 if we keep pushing forward to include that into the next round of planning and stuff. But
yep. Yes. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, have it on there, something to consider.
It's also the type of thing that is likely to score well if you're applying for grants, because it's green infrastructure. I mean, it's certainly, so I think that that's the type of thing that would probably sit well with funders if you were to be providing something that's specifically green infrastructure as part of the development.
So we talked about those things, and then, all right, Jean, do you want to? I don't know. And again, you know, this is an idea that we had, like, you know, because there's a lot of different options, right? A lot of different decision points. So, like, you know, maybe putting it into a table like this. And I know we talk about, you know, we are gonna, like, you're asking for a pro forma. But before we get to that, like maybe, and like, this is just a draft. And so don't look too closely at either the criteria or the options, because this is just sort of us putting this together in this format for you guys to be like, all right, yeah, that looks good. Maybe we should work on this a little more, or, you know, maybe that's not that helpful.
I mean, I guess the question is, is this a helpful format in terms of sort of taking a look at the different options that we're discussing? As Sue mentioned, the, you know, the criteria and the options can certainly be revised, but sometimes when you're talking about so many different variations on the theme, it's nice to kind of boil it down into something that's a little bit more simple.
I think it's very important to keep us focused on what's important. And we know there's certain things that are, you know, the power energy issues are obviously important, and then the water issues are important too. So those are the first few.
So if you could send the PowerPoint to us, or just even this table for us to spend a little more time thinking about it. It's definitely really helpful for sort of assimilating the information and sort of thinking about it. I mean, what's your expectation as it relates to the word decision? Are you expecting us to say, oh, based on this option 1A, or is it more of a tool in which we can sort of, speak at a high level and understand the benefit, pros and cons of each of these different?
I think it's probably more of a tool, but I think that in terms of decision, I mean, if there was the sense that the original layout and just was not something that was really worth pursuing, I mean, we could just basically take it out of consideration. But I do think that we're trying to get a sense of what the preference of the committee is. And this kind of gives a sense of how you reach that position. It kind of gives us that kind of map of where we got to where we are ultimately. But I think it's still got options. So I don't think that it necessarily locks you into any particular direction by listing it under optionality. We can also just change the name. It doesn't have to be called decision matrix.
Right, it could be called
It also just could be
It's useful. Yeah.
So I think we need to spend a little bit of time with this, but I mean, I certainly, from my perspective, I'm not tied to the original sort of parcel map at all. And that's why I very much like this conversation where we're listening to what the land says can be done. And we're listening to what the market wants for flexible space. And we're looking to what funders want for stormwater or renewable energy technologies, and those things are driving us towards a suggested utilization of this site rather than any allegiance that I think any of us have to the original way that it was carved up.
Well, if you just want to give us your feedback, like I said, it doesn't have to be decision matrix. If you just want to call it
Cool.
review matrix or something like that, that's maybe a little less definitive.
Yeah, we'll get that to you, try to get it to you by the end of the week in the next few days.
But this is more just to get an idea if this was an approach that you would like to see.
Yep.
Great.
Good, okay. That's our last slide for tonight.
Any questions that you have for, I mean, this has been very helpful.
Great.
Any questions that you have for us?
One thing that I did want to, I think that do you want to explore solar? What's the sort of feeling about that? Is that we could just include it as a recommendation and not spend much more time with it? Or?
I mean, it depends on your team. I mean, I certainly think given the electric constraints that we have, and given this community, I think certainly looking at solar on these, especially on these higher elevations where it will be very difficult to locate, buildings anyways, makes a whole lot of sense. So, I mean, to the extent that you have some experts on your team that can, not design anything, but be a little more technical than just a narrative description of an aspiration, that would be great. But we have some resources here in Gloucester. If you have some information, a little more information, I can certainly talk to some folks and get further feedback.
Yeah, that actually would be good, because one of the things they said is you need to talk to someone locally about their solar capacity. I'm not sure, and so I think that that maybe just is one more conversation or one more kind of question for someone. So if you can help us figure out who that person is, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yep, I can do that. So we're going to need to get out of this room in 10 minutes.
Okay.
City
Just one quick question is, how comfortable are you with me sharing information that's still in such a draft level with Geetha Ramani from Mass Development, because she was asking me for plans, she was asking for information, and I said that, we're still in, very much an iterative stage with our client, and I was reluctant to share information that certainly that you hadn't seen and that we hadn't gotten your feedback on, because she wasn't, in terms of taking to the next step and talking to people at Mass Works. So I just want to get your sense of that.
I'm generally, Mr. Transparent or whatever, but I honestly think, state agencies don't really move that quickly. I'd say let's just wait until we have,
Okay.
either a solid draft report or it's going to happen in the next couple of months. I don't think that's going to
Okay.
make a difference in access to funding or anything.
All right, because that was my sense, but yeah, she was kind of pressing me for more information. I was reluctant to provide it at this stage.
Thank you for your discretion.
Yeah. So
She's trying to be helpful. I'm not saying that.
Even an introduction. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So let me just comment briefly on the energy report. So at the next meeting of the EDIC, the July 11th meeting, there will be a presentation by Denmark. I've got a more recent iteration of their draft report, but as you guys stated, it's pretty high level, with the exception that there's some distribution maps, right? That and maybe there's some information in the appendix that would be specifically useful to you as it relates to what's available on Magnolia Ave or Conduin Road. But I can, the key engineer, Tom Jones, is at a conference this week out in San Francisco, but I think he'll be back at the end of the week. And so I can ask if he can speak with, who would it be with? Jim? Susan, who would?
Yeah, send them to me, and then I'll we'll figure out who he needs to speak with.
Okay. So what you're looking for is a little more specific information about transformers or volts or.
I guess so, like, because I don't know, Jeff, you read it too, like, it didn't really, like, nothing jumped out at me as like, okay, capacity is this or whatever, or like, it didn't.
Well, their basic argument is that there is no there's no real capacity for growth or expansion here.
Okay.
Can you find 3 megawatts? Yes, by doing some reorganizing or updating of equipment, but can you find 20 megawatts or even 10? Probably not. So, I think that you are going to have to operate, make some assumptions about likely energy usage for the businesses that might locate there and or the number. And we'll just have to come up with some estimates of what the electrical capacity and loads would be. I don't think we're going to find any good numbers that would allow you to really be more accurate.
Yep.
Precise.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was kind of the thing that jumped out to me with our discussion with the folks who do a lot of solar installations. Is, to me, you put a bunch of solar panels out and then it's all gravy, but it's not that simple, of course.
No.
Yeah, there would have to be pretty in-depth conversations with Eversource on how they're used and where they are and
right, and it's all. Our most recent report, I'll send you the most recent version actually at the end of the week, but it does a good job of explaining this lack of systemic proactive thinking. And the requirements for load and the interconnect permits that are required for new renewable energy projects, are just done on a need basis, not on an opportunity basis.
And the energy generated would have to go back to the grid and then back out here, correct? It's not stored out here. So in the end,
So you're still
You still have the same
constrained by the
constraint, right, right.
transmission.
yeah, so. Not sure, unless we stored it out here, I don't think it's gonna matter.
Yeah, so anyways, I will connect, Susan, I will connect you with Tom Jones from Daymark, and
Okay,
he can, a conversation can at least point you in the right direction, so your engineers have a little more to deal to be able to look at the constraints, the specific constraints.
sounds good.
All right, that's it. We're going to close out this meeting. So again, Team Weston and Sampson, thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Taylor, motion to adjourn, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Patty.
Thanks, Al.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you, Jeff. See you, Jeannie. See you, Susan.
See ya.